Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Powers in Play, TV7's global edition, a monthly show dealing with world powers and regional policies. And right off, let's introduce our panelists. Brigadier General in the Reserves, Yaron Rosen of the Israeli Air Force. General Rosen, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Dr. Colonel retired Eran Lerman, formerly with the Directorate of Military Intelligence and the National Security Staff.
Good to be here again.
Thank you, Eran. Brigadier General in the Reserves, Doron Gavish, the Commanding General of the Air and Missile Defense Task Force, right now in this war, but formerly the Commanding Officer of the Israeli Air Force's Air and Missile Defense Units. Welcome.
Shalom, Amir. Today in reserve, we have to say.
Today in the reserves, Reserve Brigadier General. And we are going to reserve your...
Reservation.
No, your participation here for hopefully many years.
Thank you.
And least but not last, no, not really, last but not least, Ambassador Danny Ayalon, formerly the Israeli ambassador to Washington, as well as the Deputy Foreign Minister in a previous Netanyahu government.
Good to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
The US President, Donald Trump, has visited the Persian or Arabian Gulf, at least the Arabian Peninsula. And while his visit highlighted several aspects of Mideastern policies, one dimension is perhaps salient above all. And that is that the United States is uniquely positioned in the area, and it is so dominant that the other powers, China, Russia, the European Union, if it is still a union, they are not visible as competitors to the United States. Now, this is the impression. Let's try and find out whether there is also substance behind it. Eran Lerman.
Well, to begin with, the United States has been committed to the defense of the Gulf specifically, of the region more generally. I would say since Carter promulgated the so-called Carter Doctrine and then translated it into the creation of what was first the Rapid Deployment Force.
1980.
1979, 1980, under the impact of the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, the crisis in Iran. And then that led in 83 to the creation of the Central Command. Since then, there have been a whole series of American military interventions in the region. This has been the main arena of American military action in the last 40 years and more. And clearly, as a result, the countries of the region feel an American presence in a much more visceral sense than a European or the Russians were unique in that they intervened in Syria, and that intervention now has come to naught, to ruin. The Chinese are far away, and I have seen, despite some diplomatic breakthroughs like the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement organized in Beijing, but in more concrete terms, the Chinese footprint is still minor. They are now making inroads in Egypt, interestingly, but nothing compared to the immense American military and strategic presence. Beyond that, there is a diplomatic leverage that the United States has that no one else has, in the sense that, among other things, Israel is deeply beholden to the United States. And so if you want to do business on the Israeli question, you need Washington. It used to be considered that it was the other way around. If you needed business in Washington, you had to go to Israel. But unfortunately, this mystique has to some extent been damaged by the manner in which Trump handled his visit. The deal to release an Israeli hostage, happens to be an American citizen, without actually Israel being directly involved. The huge transactional arrangements with the 3 Arab countries which he visited. The breakthrough in lifting the sanctions on Syria, without consultation with Israel, openly stated that this was done impulsively and without consultation with Israel. All of this, I think, changed the dynamics in ways that should worry Israeli decision makers.
Doron, agree, disagree, or do you want to expand on what Eran said?
I think maybe in a higher resolution, I think based on the foundations that were just stated, I think that what we have is a bet from the United States on the Saudi sphere. So the Middle East now is the proving ground for Trump's global campaign, if you will. But now there was a discussion in the last few months since his inauguration, where will he start? So I think the Saudi sphere is where he started. I think we spoke about this and we sort of hoped that the Saudi sphere would be the anchor. That said, because the way Trump operates is momentum and very fast momentum, that is good because it destabilizes everyone, adversaries, but allies as well. And Israel is behind. Trump is moving fast, and if you're not with him, you might end up being against him. And that is where the current state of affairs from the Saudi anchor going into Jordan, into Syria, into Lebanon, positive for Israel. That is the new axis of stability that the United States is betting on. The Abraham Accords from the eastern flank, being the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, if you will, are the flanks, the maritime flanks on the east and on the west. But still, Israel needs to catch up with its strategy, with its long-term plan. And in that sense, Gaza is sort of is holding back.
Interestingly enough, one country, Iraq, has not been mentioned during the Trump trip regarding joining what he called the Abrahamic Accords. Now, Danny, there is at least seemingly a contradiction between the U.S. being so dominant in the Middle East, but the Middle East not being dominant in U.S. policy, perhaps going down to third place, if not fourth, after what they call Homeland Defense, the southern border, the Golden Dome scheme of anti-missile defense, then the Taiwan scenario, China versus Taiwan.
Not to mention Ukraine.
And number three, Russia, Ukraine. Only then do we get to the Middle East. This is the so-called pivot, which everyone has been expecting for the last 10, 15 years, and perhaps is now coming. So how do you see this? How do you settle this contradiction?
Well, Amir, you know, from time immemorial, there was a debate among historians whether history is carved by leaders or leaders are made by history. Look at Churchill vis-a-vis Chamberlain or whatever. I think Trump is a nature phenomenon. I think single-handedly he is steering the United States into the forefront. If you recall, just in this table, maybe a year, 2 years ago, we spoke about the diminishing influence of the United States vis-a-vis China and, of course, Russia and others. And now it's only the United States. Now we're talking about a Pax Americana here and even beyond. So I think that with
it's
Trump,
more like tax Americana with the tariff,
also.
with the tariffs.
yes. So we see that after all this tumult he caused, and maybe it was, I don't know if it was by design or default, but it seems like maybe this is his tactical, conduct of operation to, rattle everyone and then try to bring them down. It seems like he is putting China on an even keel, with the taxes and with other trade balances. Europe is very much, I would say, under his thumb. They are very much in a flux, not knowing where he will go. And then there is the Middle East where Yaron is right. So far, the Middle East is the focal point or a pivotal point for Trump. It seems like here he has more say than he would with in Russia and Ukraine case, or Taiwan-China case. And here he can make a difference, and maybe this in his mind would show the others that they better watch out and do what he wants, especially when it comes to Israel. If he can make Israel, for instance, now stop the war in Gaza, that in itself is an achievement that he can really attain what he wants vis-a-vis political constraints or anything else. Of course, what helps him also is the fact that there's almost no opposition to him in Washington. The Democrats are still licking their wounds, and Congress is his. And I think that helps him bring up American deterrence against all players in global.
Doron, you were present at the creation of the heightened presence of American forces here back in the early 1990s. Of course, there was this first decade.
Now you are revealing our age.
Well, you were in middle school, and we used to draft teenagers at the time. Earlier, Eran recounted the time President Carter, following the revolution in Iran and the invasion of Afghanistan, shifted American attention and resources to the region, and later Reagan created the Central Command. Earlier, of course, the European Command and the Pacific Command had the entire world almost to themselves. But in 1990, Desert Shield, then 91, Desert Storm, the American military came in force. And it is really a bit strange to remember that after the invasion of Kuwait, when Secretary of Defense Cheney flew to Riyadh, he was afraid that the Saudis will not let American troops come to the kingdom's defense. Of course, now it seems only natural. But with President Trump already in his first term, and now perhaps even more so, wishing to perhaps withdraw American forces from the region, patrol over the horizon, he must play with the forces at hand. He doesn't have everything everywhere. If he is preparing for a China contingency, for an Indo-Pac contingency, CENTCOM must suffer. And you're in touch with your American colleagues. Do you sense from them that they are ready to pack up and leave?
Well, allow me to join the conversation that was there, and then I'll go back to your answer, to your question, Amir. I think first, when we're looking at the United States and what is now being done within the Middle East, we have to remember, that this is something that we always criticize ourselves. But with the United States, you go to documents that are being written. What is our national strategy? What is our defense strategy? And when you go to those documents, you see exactly what are who are the enemies, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, what are we going to do, and so on. So China, Russia, and we see it also in the Middle East. So we could look at it, first of all, from this point of view. From the point of view of the national strategy of the United States, what is being done here in the Middle East, it's really exactly what is being written over there. This is the first thing. The second thing, and here I would like to connect to what was said by Ambassador Ayalon, is that here, the United States and President Trump, he could gain a quick wins. And when you look at the business world, in the business world, you always ask yourself, where are my quick wins? And here, the constellation allows President Trump and the United States to gain a quick win. I can tell you that within the relations between Israel and CENTCOM, what we see now is very close relations. For sure, during the last war, we see that the change of strategy by the United States, also on the offensive, and not only on the defensive in our arena, we saw it in Yemen and some other places. This is something that even makes those relations closer. So at this point, I see only very close relations between the two nations.
Eran, everyone has been saying that personnel is policy. And President Trump tried to nominate some of his associates, not always successfully. Some withdrew, and then he shifted his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, to the United Nations. Secretary of State Rubio is now filling in for that. Do you see any tug of war over the president's decision-making process, and whether people, rather than schools of thought, are gaining the upper hand?
Well, first of all, it's quite obvious that this is a divided administration, divided councils. I'm leaving aside the discussion of how capable the former President Biden was during his last years in office, but the group working around him was fairly unified in its perceptions and in action.
Blinken, Sullivan,
Austin worked quite closely. There was
and Burns at CIA.
And Burns. It's really reminiscent of, the people always go back to Bush 41 and his team and the manner in which even when they disagreed, they agreed how
Cheney,
to disagree.
Scowcroft.
And on the other hand, you've had a long history of American administrations from Reagan and onwards, where you could actually see personal and ideological fault lines. And today we are seeing very clearly two ideological orientations in a fairly sharp debate with each other. The MAGA, essentially isolationist perception. People talk about America first. They sometimes need to be reminded that this was the slogan of the Lindbergh and his camp in the late 1930s and early 40s until the U.S. found itself in the war.
So this is right and far right?
I don't want to use these terms confuse rather than.
But it's not
clarify.
liberals.
Neither are liberals. In the progressive sense or in the left-wing sense, they say let's adhere to international idealism, international institutions, norms, etc. These are unilateralists on both sides. But there are unilateralists who want to draw in, and there are still the unilateralists who talk about American leadership, global American leadership. A person like Secretary of State and now acting National Security Advisor Marco Rubio comes from the Cuban community in Florida, which was committed to the global war on communism for obvious, even personal reasons for years and years, and there are others in around Trump who come from that side of the argument. But there is an argument, and it's translated into concrete decisions. For example, the decision to withdraw from the fighting in Yemen, latching on to the Houthi willingness to stop attacking American ships, which is, I don't think this was the only reasons the Americans went in the first place. But it reflected a certain dynamic, and we wonder sometimes, institutionally, we know where the Pentagon stands. But individually, where Pete Hegseth would take it could determine quite a lot. So, and Israel, I have to say, cannot be neutral in this. I wrote this for the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security. I wrote a short note on the 8th of May, the 80th anniversary of VE Day. And I said, basically, look, we can no more be neutral on this one than Britain could be in 1940 in the division in President Roosevelt's council at the time. Our future depends on a robust American presence on the global scene in the region and beyond the region. By the way, speaking of the pivot to Asia, I always used to say, when a door opens or pivots, it needs a hinge. The Middle East, with its resources, is a hinge that could have an immense impact on the Chinese, who are energy dependent, for example. And with an administration that doesn't mind drilling, this could make a difference.
General Rosen, you were part of the Air Force High Command as well as the IDF General Staff as the cyber chief for the military. Put on your professional military hat for a moment. Regarding what we have been talking about, the possible withdrawal of American assets from the region. Is it so bad? We have seen reports by the U.S. Air Force, because in the U.S. military, as you all know, air and missile defense are in the Army, and the intercept part by fighters, as well as air-to-ground attack, that's Air Force. And following the two operations against Iran in April and October of last year, the U.S. Air Force has been proud to publish the accounts of fighter pilots and maintainers who say that a mere day, 24 hours after they have been sent to the region, they don't say where exactly, but they came from Oklahoma and Utah. They touched down, they prepared their planes, and they flew and shot down dozens of drones, while the ballistic missiles were intercepted by Doron's colleagues. So maybe if power projection is so easy, why mourn the possible relocation of American forces from the region where they are vulnerable to attack by terrorists, which will then force the administration to retaliate, escalate? Maybe it's the best solution.
You know, even superpowers, global superpowers, have to consider, how to use their forces. Just like in any company, just in like any army, military, whatever, power projection isn't endless. And what nations do, especially the United States, is use all forms of national power in order to project power. So the long-term projection of power of the United States in the Middle East right now is a blend of military and economic. Military, because we are in the process of talking to Iran, and it has to look like a credible threat that something will come from somewhere and do what's needed to be done. That's the military projection of power. The economic projection of power is what we just discussed. The Saudi sphere is a very long-term commitment and tie between the US economy and the region based in Saudi. The Saudis and the Gulf states are going to invest billions of dollars. Billions of dollars are jobs. Jobs and security and Middle East stability is confidence in the Middle East for these rulers. So there's a quid pro quo. There's a relationship here and rings of sort of influence that are playing part in this game, in this global game. And the United States we don't need to be counting if the Truman is here or the Truman is getting far away. How many bombers are in this, Diego Garcia, et cetera, et cetera. It's important, but it's not important. The big picture is that the United States is heavily invested in the short term, in the long term, and there are tactical lefts and rights that are conducted by CENTCOM, which is heavily invested with the IDF and with other allies. And what we need to do is really take care, from Israel's perspective, again, going back to what we need to do, is to catch up. Because in the midst of all this huge power play of the United States, Israel needs to position itself in the right place to enjoy this new sphere of influence that the United States is planting in the region.
Doron, perceptions count. And the more powerful a country such as the United States, especially the United States, is, the higher the expectation from it to succeed in an operation. And there is an asymmetry, of course, between the United States, the most powerful military in the world, and the Houthis. The Houthis, in order to appear successful, only have to shoot once in a while at a vessel in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, or to launch a missile at Israel. While the United States invested billions of dollars over the Biden and Trump administrations in trying to deter or defeat the Houthis, and it has been only moderately successful. And eventually, rather than attack Iran as the president has threatened, because the Houthis are supposed to be Iran's proxy, they reached a ceasefire which only deals with American vessels, not European vessels, not Israeli vessels, nothing which would open the maritime routes towards the Suez Canal. So how do you see this phenomenon of asymmetry, where one side, in order to win, must defeat the other side conclusively, while for the other side, all it has to do is subsist, survive, win another day in order to try again?
Well, I wouldn't really compare between United States in the terrorist organization, which are the Houthis.
Terrorists with missiles. This is not your
right.
grandfather's
but
terror.
still, I wouldn't really compare. I'll go along with what was just mentioned by General Rosen. It's a tactic situation with the Houthis, but the picture is much, much, much bigger. And on this specific issue, by the way, this is what the United States stated from the beginning. They said, we are going to stop their attack against us, and we are going to this 1 month campaign and whatever. And by the way, also money counts also there. You need, when you project power, it is very costly. And when you have a lot of other things that you need to do, so you pick your fight and you choose what do you want to do. I think that this is really something very tactic against the Houthis, but we have to look on the big picture. And here I would like to continue the discussion that was before, because I think it's very important from the Israeli point of view. I think that one, you ask yourself what happened during this visit. We all talk about energy and the trillions of dollars that are going on those. But we have to look also on something else, that if you look on the people that were there in this visit, is the AI. And how much the region is going to invest on the AI. And this is really something that if we're talking that Israel have to catch up and we have to be there, I think this is a trend that we must be part of it. Because there is going to be a lot of investments on AI, servers, and whatever is relevant to this world. In here, in our area, you could look at it in another Silicon Valley that would be built in our region. We must be a part of it. This is the trend, and we also have to give a big credit, by the way, to the Saudis and to the ones in the Gulf, that they have strategy. They are looking into the future. They said, okay, our wealth is really made up of energy, but energy won't be here forever, and we have to find another way, and this is the AI. So I think that it wasn't talked enough, but from an Israeli point of view, for sure, AI, and this is really the trend that we must be part of it in what is going on in our region.
But artificial intelligence, the facilities, the infrastructure, they are also going to be vulnerable to hostility, to aggression. The nations investing in them will need protection.
We need protection, and we need cyber protection, and we need physical protection, and other for sure. That will be part of it. Everything is really tied to everything.
Danny, the U.S., ever since the late 1940s, led a system of alliances. Some alliances in the legal sense of treaties ratified by the U.S. Senate, and others partnerships or something in the middle, major non-NATO ally and the like. Is this system now being downgraded by the Trump administration's policy?
Well, it seems like so far Trump's attention is to the economics of things. he has discovered something which is called MFN, most favorable nation when it comes to taxation and dual taxation and other kind of reciprocity, exactly. But I'm not sure this is very long-lived because things will erupt. And we live really in an era which is very explosive. We just saw what happened between India and Pakistan, and we have not heard the last of that. And Europe itself, European countries, especially Eastern Europeans, but now it's also going into the Western Europe, they are really reeling and preparing themselves from a war in Europe. And we see it manifested by doubling, sometimes tripling the defense budget. And in that case, they do not see, at this point, the United States as a reliable ally or reliable partner. And this in itself could cause a lot of instability because this can either invite Russia when they feel that Europe is less aligned or the Western world is split, and this can further destabilize the international relations. I believe that in these still very first days or months of the Trump administration, it's difficult to foresee, but I believe that senses will come, and he has some strategists around him which will tell him and prove to him that he must regain leadership also in the strategic and military areas as well.
General Rosen, if the United States is able to do in the region almost whatever it wants, but it does not wish to invest so much relative to other regions, is it possible that it will outsource some of the missions, for instance, to Turkey? If President Trump has already met with Ahmed Ashara, the new ruler of Syria, but he also used his good friend Erdogan of Turkey, who recommended that Trump meet Ashara. The Turks are probably going to gain from the decision by the Kurdish underground PKK to dismantle the organization. Maybe Turkey will be the American viceroy in this region.
Maybe the case if Israel does many, many mistakes. But I think that, as I see it, I think there are many reasons to believe that Turkey will not be that partner. For various reasons that I think Erdogan and his ideology with the Muslim Brotherhood and Qatar, under the table, I think we're not hearing it straightforward. It's very transactional in a way. The United States might use Turkey for its own use, and for maybe Turkey will gain something, but not as the anchor, as the main mothership of the Middle East. I think Israel needs to play that role. It is that role in many, many ways, but yet still, yet to be seen. I think that in a way, again, gaining stability, that's exactly what we're seeing now in the last few months. And again, the Saudi play, this visit was really a show of how to project power in so many ways. But I think that, things have to solidify. We have to be very patient. We're a little bit impatient for many good reasons, but still we have to be very, very patient to see how these things play out. One, Iran. So this is a huge joker on the table. Which way will it turn? How will this play out? One. Two, Iraq. You mentioned it. It's a huge area of instability. How will Syria turn out? Where will that go? How will it be divided, not divided? What sphere of influence will be in the north, in the south? So many things need to play out in this grand scheme. Yet, the big foot has been placed. Now the small things have to come into place.
Your view?
Well, the problem is a degree of unpredictability, which Trump has turned into an art. And so his relationship with Turkey veered from brutal pressure on some cases and buddy voices. How deeply rooted this is in an understanding of regional history, I don't know, because if you told Erdogan or commended Erdogan for finally governing Syria, which nobody managed in 2,000 years, I think the Romans, the Byzantines, and the Ottomans should feel insulted. But at the end of the day, it clearly, whatever impact Erdogan may have right now and his partnership with the Qataris, which is quite close, I think he's still viewed with extreme suspicion by the Emiratis, by the Saudis, by the Egyptians. No matter how friendly Trump may be with Ahmed al-Shara in Damascus, they still look at the hordes of former jihadists from around the world, from Uyghurs and Egyptians and others who are still there in Damascus with HTS, and ask themselves, as far as they are concerned, as far as we are concerned,
but Iran,
the jury is still out. And Erdogan is not an effective enforcer.
Trump's Mideast tour netted a lot of contracts for the Boeing Corporation.
Oh, yes.
Lockheed wants to sell F-35s to Turkey.
To Turkey, and ultimately this has been delayed. This has been derailed in its day. This is something for the Greek lobby in Washington to worry about. By the way, there are many Republican influencers who have Greek origins, and their view of Erdogan and his ambitions in the Aegean are stark. And so the game is afoot still.
There's also a strong Armenian lobby in Washington.
Yes, and
always
has been, which hasn't forgiven or forgotten 1915. In a more general sense, there's a question of whether Trump is generating dynamics globally in his favor or against him. I have to say the string of elections in Canada, Australia, and now Romania indicate that being associated with Trump and his positions does not necessarily guarantee success.
Also for Tesla.
Yeah, well, that's another matter.
And by the way,
the regional game is very much in his favor, but more globally, the balance, the jury is still out.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Turkey and what other countries here in the region sees, we have to remember that Turkey is a Muslim Brotherhood. We have to remember what happened in Egypt and what was the Turkish position toward Egypt. They remember it in Saudi, in our region, that no one really wants to see them and their idea of going back to the Ottoman Empire, but this time as a Muslim Brotherhood. So I think that Turkey really is a very interesting case, but I totally agree with General Rosen. I don't think that there would be an anchor in any way because the region don't want them to be not only the United States.
Danny, Eran earlier mentioned the neocons, the neoconservatives, which apparently are losing in the fight over Trump's soul. When you were there, Bush, Condoleezza Rice, and others were what now Trump derisively calls nation builders, who were really wrecking.
Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz,
yes,
all of them.
So values are no longer important, even though Trump said that he wants Gaza to be a freedom area. Freedom from whom? How free can they be in this region? So values don't count anymore in American foreign policy?
At this point, especially at the top, seemingly not. It's like they wanted to change, when they had some issues with France, they wanted to change the name of French fries to freedom fries. The same thing maybe now. But also there are some informal important figures that influence Trump, not just J.D. Vance. For instance, his son, Donald Jr., which basically has, according to all the information I have, a pact with J.D. Vance, and he is the one actually that elected him to be vice president, in the idea that J.D. Vance will run after Trump and take Donald Jr. as his running mate. He's also an
Does Eric
isolationist.
Trump agree with that?
Eric has enough to run, the big economic empire. But yes, right now it seems like that the personalities have a lot of influence.
Famous last words. Yaron, do you want to add to your excellent exposition? No.
The Middle East.
Good luck to all of us.
Good luck to all of us. The Middle East is now the launch pad for Trump's foreign policy, and we are yet to be seen what will come out of it, and Israel needs to cling on.
Launchpads are Doron Gavish's business, anti-missile
But
missiles.
we have to say, I think that overall, this is for the benefit of Israel. I'm still
Danny
optimistic.
Ayalon, Doron Gavish, Eran Lerman, Yaron Rosen, thank you very much. And we will be back with another edition of Powers in Play next month. For the time being, Shalom from Jerusalem.